Hi, Phil Bradbury with Little Walter Tube Amps. I'd like to talk to you just a little bit about my philosophy on tube amps. I got a little frustrated when I was doing some recording of my own about 8 or 9 years ago, and remembered some of the early tube amps that I had owned. And they were totally different than what I was buying off the shelf, and thought, well, why would this be? And as I did my research and study, I realized that from the late 40s to the early 50s, we had changed several things in the amplifier in the interest of making more of them quicker, cheaper, making them readily available to a wide range of people, which was a good thing. But at the same time, we tended to build some of the tonality out that we had started with. And as I did my research, I realized that you could go back and build an amp the way they built them in the 30s and the 40s, very simply, no bells and whistles, just pure tone. Because think about this. You've worked for hundreds, maybe thousands of hours of honing your craft as a musician with your instrument. So whenever you go out, you want to sound as good as you possibly can, whether you're playing for your girlfriend in the living room, or you're playing Madison Square Garden, or you're playing a large theater, or you're playing the biggest club in town. You want to be remembered by the people that hear you as the best you can possibly be. So think about it this way. When you play your instrument, you cause your strings to oscillate back and forth alternately across the pole magnets on your pickups. This creates a very, very tiny AC signal, which is actually, if you think about it, it's taking your life's work and practice and all your woodshedding, and it's running it through a small cable, a 1/4-inch cable like this. And it's, as I say, such a tiny AC signal, it's hard to measure it. So when that goes to the amplifier, it's up to an amp builder, it's the way I feel about it at least, to protect that as much as we possibly can and make it sound like you and your instrument. I don't want my amps to color or affect your tone whatsoever. I want people to simply hear you and your instrument as honestly as we can transparently reproduce you. And think of the amplifier as an instrument itself, because you've got a really good guitar or bass or whatever instrument you may play. Well, you do not want to put it through a lesser quality amplifier or speaker and speaker cabinet, because that will dumb down your signal chain. Now, I feel very strongly about people understanding tubes. The power tube is where I would start if I was, I didn't know this when I was starting to play music in the 60s. To me, an amplifier was something that you had to buy to be as loud as the drummer. And that's about the most thought process that went into an amplifier. Well, today, what I know today and what I like to share with my friends and customers and any a musician that plays an instrument is the very first thing you do when selecting the right amplifier for you, and I mean the right amplifier. We all play through amplifiers, but boy, when you find the right one, that gets special, and you'll know it. So a 6V6 tube, one of the most classic American tubes. It's in the famous Fender Deluxe Reverb. It was in the Tweed Deluxe. It's a great tube. It's limited in its wattage capability, so therefore it makes a really good tube to come with some early breakup. So if you're a blues player, you're playing slide guitar, you're playing lap steel, that's a great tube because you can drive it a bit and really get it to break up nicely. Actually, this tube can emulate what most pedal manufacturers are going for when they have a distortion or an O-drive pedal. They're simply trying to emulate this type of tube pushed real hard. Now, let's say that you're playing R&B, country, rock, something that you do want to drive it and you want to get a little hair on the note occasionally, but you need a solid, clean platform. Remember, no one makes a clean pedal. So just like you build your house on a solid foundation, I think if you start with a good amplifier that has a good, solid, clean tone, then when you affect it with your pedal board, you're going to hear it much better. It's going to be a lot. Now, so this is the 6L6, which is probably the most common American tube. It's used in the old Fender Twins and Deluxes, and a lot of people use this amp, or this tube. Now, notice the size differential between the 6V and the 6L. Okay, well, let's say that you are a jazz player or you're a country player and you want super clean, articulate, and you're not worried about breakup and you don't want a lot of hair on the note. We'd take you to one of these larger KT series tubes, like a 6550 or a KT88 or even a KT120. Now, the one thing I want you to notice about this, as the bottles get bigger, the envelope we call it, of the tube, you gain headroom. So just not to be technical, but to think about it, the smaller the bottle, the easier it is for breakup. The larger the bottle, the less breakup tendencies you're going to have, and you're going to be clean with it. This would be great for a fat-bodied guitar, a hollow-bodied guitar, even acoustic guitar. Now, with that said, the very first amplifiers in America, the preamp tube, was a tube like this. This happens to be a 6SC7 that I use, but there are 6SN7s and different numbers. But the American preamp tubes were in a metal can like this. You can still find them, but I use a really good quality 8-pin 6SC7. They're made in Russia, of course. All the tubes are today. And this is a low gain preamp tube, a multiplier of 40-to-1, okay, low gain. What you're probably playing through, unless you have an old vintage amp, is a 9-pin preamp tube, like a 12AX7, an AT7, an AY7, very common tube, a Novel tube. Novel meaning 9, it's a 9-pin tube. Okay, so you've got your octal 8-pin tube or your Novel 9-pin tube. This is a 100-to-1 multiplier. That's why it's a higher gain tube. This is a 40-to-1. The main difference in these two, where you won't get gain and volume emphasized on this tube, you'll get dynamic response that once you master it and you have the hands for it, it almost adds another dimension to your playing with that dynamic response, that attack that you can emulate. Anyway, some thoughts on tubes from Phil Bradbury at Little Walter Tube Amps. Thank you so much.